So a couple years back, a bunch of beta designs for the original Pokemon had leaked. Somebody stole the development assets for Gold and Silver and Red and Blue, I believe. So I started to hyperfixate on collecting a bunch of these old designs that were either scrapped entirely, or ones that just looked different enough from their official counterparts that I could kind of just distinguish them as their own. And I think today that we're going to start drawing some of them. So I got all these designs put together, and I started flipping through the Pokedex. The first notable differences were Ivysaur and Venusaur, who sort of looked like they were growing on a planet with much higher gravity, or like if they didn't drink enough milk and then their growth just got stunted, or if they were never rotated in a nursery and their flower just lobbed over onto one side and nobody ever fixed it. You know, there's something really funny to me about how this Ivysaur's legs just look like they're roots that are still affixed into the dirt. It's kind of like if it was supposed to come out of the ground with the other Bulbasaurs, like if they were animals that just sort of sprouted out of the dirt and then crawled away somewhere else and this one just didn't, and instead just decided to stay behind and get really overgrown. And that gives me an idea for the Venusaur design. Looking at this guy, while it is different than the official art, it does just kind of look like it's a horizontally challenged Ivysaur. But if we go with the idea that this is supposed to be a sprout that never found its legs, then that actually makes a bit more sense. So we're going to keep the lopsided flower, and instead of letting him find his footing, so to speak, he's going to continue being solidly planted on the ground. And his legs are also roots now, and he's growing moss because he doesn't actually move very much. But hey, rolling stones and whatnot, don't you just want to sleep in the dirt while everybody else gets to go out and live their lives? I know I do! Anyway, so my idea here is that if you've got a really lazy Bulbasaur, their evolution is going to involve a lot of roots. So I think it makes sense that he is a grass ground type. Good luck getting these guys to do too much, but if you put in the effort, you're gonna get a nice, hardy tree, who according to his original Dex entry, has a bewitching aroma that wafts from its flower. The fragrance becalms those engaged in battle. So what you're telling me is that I've decided to bestow upon him this incredibly descriptive face. Not only is he always stoned, but if you battle him, you can be too! Also, shout out to the Pokemon Azure team. When I asked them if they could help me out coming up with stats for these designs, they went absolutely all out and even helped me name them. Alright, who's next? So up next on the Pokedex was the Charmander line, and none of them were really too far off from their original designs, but I did want to at least draw Charmander because the original sprite for this guy looks a little bit like a Xerox of the current day Charmander. And then I remembered that his original design in the anime and the trading cards actually looked a lot more like a lizard, and looking at this design, I do like it a little bit more. So I'm just gonna accentuate those striking features we have here in the sprite, and So I was looking at some old Ken Sugimori art for Charmander from before the games actually launched, just to see if that could get me any inspiration, I guess. And it looks like he also had a spike on the back of his neck. I guess there were some noticeable differences after all, so we're just gonna make sure that fits right in there. Oh yeah, and then also in that original sprite there was some odd shading on his nose that I think was just shading, but I'm gonna turn it into a stripe because I like visual distinction. And then I'm coloring it with a slightly darker reddish orange, just to be a little original. Perfect. So I didn't think that the rest of the evolutionary line had too many differences, at least not enough to actually draw, but then as I was working on the Charmander, I looked more and more at the Charizard sprite that was kind of just off my other screen, and the more I look at that Charizard, the more I can't help but feel like he's holding the fire and not breathing it. And he's got these big round pupilless eyes. That seems like an opportunity to me. So I was about to get started on this, and then I actually did some more digging and I found some really old Sugimori artwork of Charizard from, I don't even know what this is from, but this Charizard has a nearly cubic jaw and only a single horn, and as far as I'm concerned that does technically count as a beta design. But now I'm conflicted, which one should I draw? We can either go with this absolute Chad, or we can go with the one that scares me a little bit more each time I look to the right side of the screen. Or we can kind of combine the two of them, adding elements from one and putting it onto the other. Trick question, I'm doing both. This is Charizard we're talking about. Did you seriously think that he was only going to be getting one form? We're staying on theme here, whether Matsuda likes it or not. Here we go. I really like how Brick over here just looks like he could use his entire head as a battering ram. Either that or his lower jaw is just like a pelican's and he's carrying a lot of water or something. And that explosive tail that I see can only be a sign of good and proper emotional restraint. It's like if when he was still a Charmander, he heard that Pokedex entry about how he would die if his tail actually went out, and then he just spent the next couple of decades physically flexing until he evolved into whatever this is. Meanwhile, this guy over here apparently skipped Shoulder Day in favor of being able to psychokinetically control fire. Which, What a pull if you're a literal dragon. I know I'm the one that came up with this idea, but that is just so... Oh, you breathe fire with your mouth? That's cute. Talk to me when you learn real strength. If more of his focus was targeted at mental stability also, that would explain why his tail fire is just so tiny. Just so itty-bitty. And if you replace the fire type with psychic instead, that would explain his weak-ass wings that probably don't actually move at all. But they're there, because it's in the sprite. You know, I started this as a bit, but I actually do genuinely like the idea behind these variants. Just a brain versus brawn kind of theme. Ain't that just the way? You think that there aren't any beta Charizard designs to work with, but when you look closely enough, you loophole your way into two. Ah, serendipity. Next in the Pokédex list is one of my favorite variations, and that's the variation of Blastoise. Or rather, the lack thereof here. You see, there were some leaks floating around a little bit before the big leak of Pokemon Red and Green in 2019, of this back sprite that seemed to come after Wartortle in the Pokédex, where it looked like its big poofy tail was still present and even bigger, and then the beta Red and Green leak actually happened in 2019, and we got to see the front sprite of this different Pokemon, this alternate evolution of Wartortle called Touartle. I think. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The true evolution of the Squirtle line in all of their glory. I'll be honest, while I like Blastoise's design a little bit better, this does explain the big fluffy tail thing that Wartortle had going on that I have been confused about for the past 20 years. And I honestly think that this makes a little bit more sense as an evolution. Lucky for me, this is the only design on today's list that is actually a wholly original Pokemon, so I don't need to really take that many creative liberties for his look. Before I actually started this drawing, I started looking up some stuff about Touartle and Wartortle and Squirtle too, to see if I could pinpoint any of the original ideas behind their design. And apparently Wartortle is actually based on a really cool Japanese myth called the Minogame, which is a kind of sea turtle that is said to live up to 10,000 years, and as it gets older and older and older, it starts just growing a tail made out of seaweed and algae. And thinking more about that, I'm actually thinking that I might change the coloring of Touartle in the end to actually fit that description, because even though that this is a good explanation of what the big puppy tail was supposed to turn into, it still doesn't explain why it's white. Maybe I'll change that in the render, maybe I won't. So for the sake of my own schedule and the sake of my own sanity, I wanted to just draw the beta variants of any of the starter Pokemon and their evolutions, and the only ones that actually looked different enough to do this were Ivysaur, Venusaur, kind of Charmander, Charizard, and then Touartle. And I think that's pretty good, but ending on a Pokemon that was kind of already designed for me was a little bit of a boring way to end the video. So I'm just going to backtrack for a second, and looking over all these rendered designs, I'm proud of how they turned out. Brick over here was worth the journey alone. But I can't help but feel like these lines are a little uneven, so I'm just gonna top them off. For Bulbasaur, I couldn't really find any old designs that looked any different than the one that we have right now, apart from the more angular style that Sugimori usually used, but I think we really landed on something special with the lazy dirt baby metaphor, so I'm taking that a step further. This is a Bulbasaur that just kinda started sprouting. Maybe all the other Bulbasaurs finished crawling out of the dirt already, and about 15% of them are ready to make their trip out from their nests into the beautiful ocean that we call forests, while the rest of them meet their terrible fate getting pecked off by Spearow or whatever. Asterisk, I hear you all saying that Bulbasaurs hatch, and the moment that you can show me a tree that lays eggs, I might even listen to you. Anyway, this little guy is part of the 1% that maybe just kind of crawled out halfway and then just decided to stop, and that eventually leads us to Stoned Tony. So I don't really know what it was about the sprites for the Charmander line that made me think that they were going to be way harder to get beta designs for, because honestly, all three of these look like first drafts of what God intended. I don't think we're going to have any trouble filling the gap here. With his arms in the place that they happen to be, this guy already looks tense, anxious, and violent. Because you see, how I see Brick and Barry over there is less of a design disparity and more of a brain versus brawn metaphor. So this Charmeleon, through whatever circumstances need to exist, seems to have an unending fear about whether or not they should be strong enough to tough out the elements or smart enough to adapt around them. Only evolving will let them know for sure, but until then, they're left in a state of abject anxiety, just like all teenagers should be. The Squirtle and Wartortle designs needed to flow naturally into Touartle, but But following the theme that we have going on here of the starters are almost the originals, I wanted to make sure that Squirtle was immediately recognizable, so the plan was only to change up the tail and make sure that it was already white and fluffy, until I went to go read the Pokedex entries of these three to see if there was anything else in there that I could use as inspiration for his redesign. And his entry reads, "When it retracts its long neck into its shell, it squirts out water with vigorous force." Long neck, you say? That's not the Squirtle I'm familiar with. I think we found our point of divergence. And by doing this, I can hopefully make you and Wartortle look a little old. I'll spare you the wrinkles, but I will just say you're probably born with white hair already. Just like your daddy. Also, I can't pretend to know anything about how most water Pokemon shoot liquids like a fire hose, but I really like the implication that this one just sort of pumps it out of their neck like a Nerf blaster. And done. Wartortle would also need to be pretty similar to the original if he was going to evolve into Touartle. They all look pretty samey. So instead of having the official design there for reference, I kind of just based it on the red and green sprites, which look sorta... You know what, he has the spirit. Ultimately though, I really couldn't think of anything too different about him that would make him look actually appealing, so we're just gonna go ahead and make sure that that long neck is at least implied there. Unfortunately, its original Pokedex entry doesn't offer any inspiration besides the fact that its long fur-colored tail is a symbol of its longevity. However, at this point, I also went to read Touartle's Pokedex entry, which is, "Some of them are so old that they are believed to have lived before the human race ever existed at all." So really, the only thing that we need to do here is make sure that he already looks a little bit old, which we can achieve with some mouth wrinkles in its middle stage. Ah, the millennial plight of trying to go out to parties and then getting lower back pains. We're staying on theme here. This Pokemon is born old and he'll die, presumably never. Also, I can think of two implications for where this Pokemon actually comes from in the canon. One would be that this particular Squirtle would be a fossil Pokemon, like a genetic ancestor to regular Squirtles through Darwinian evolution. And the other is just that you keep hitting B every time your Wartortle tries to evolve for like a really, really long time. How long? The Pokedex says that these guys are between 40 and 100,000 years old, so you've probably got a lot of grinding to do. It's like the opposite of a Nuzlocke, which is potentially even worse if you're the Pokemon in question. You're not allowed to die as long as I'm training you. And there we go. Based on original artwork from Ken Sugimori and the original beta designs for the games, we have got 10 out of the first 9 Pokemon on the Pokedex, redesigned and happily in a modern art style. There are so many beta and unused Pokemon designs that I was able to find as I was putting this video together, and they are all really great. Let me know if you'd like to see me draw more of these, and I will gladly do my best. If you're interested in seeing the full and unedited speed paints for these videos, minus maybe speeding them up a little bit because they all took a couple of hours each to actually do, all of that is going to be going up on my Patreon, which also, if you're interested in signing up for that, you'll get your name in the credits of my videos. Links to that and all of my other socials are going to be in the description below. Also, I would like to again thank the team behind Pokemon Azure. Pokemon Azure is a Greek-inspired fan game that I have the pleasure of being a creative lead on, and while these designs probably won't make their appearance in the game anytime soon, there are lots of other unique and awesome Pokemon that really make the experience something special. Act 1 is out now, Act 2 will be out very soon, and I'll also drop a link to that down below. And I'll see you guys the next time I post something. Peace out, guys.